The 9th century polymath and engineer dared to make heavier-than-air machine flight 1,000 years before motorized aeroplanes were invented. The Wright brothers may have invented the first motorized aircraft. But the 9th century engineer Abbas Ibn Farnas is considered to be the first human to fly with the help of a pair of wings built by silk, wood and real feathers. According to historians, when Ibn Farnas was between the age of 65 and 70, he jumped off a cliff from Yemen's Jabal al-Aris mountain and glided in the air, staying in flight for at least 10 minutes. The short flight left him both injured and disappointed. He realized that because he had neglected the mechanics of landing, he couldn't balance his flight in the air and ended up crash landing. Ibn Farnas lived for another 12 years. He realized that slow landing is achieved via the collaborative work between tail and wings. A conclusion he reached after decades of studies of bird flight and their landings. It is Farnas who could successfully claim to be behind the theory that went on to create the ornithopter, an aircraft that mimics birds and flies by flapping its wings. His flying machine diagrams went on to become the cornerstones of aviation engineering in the late 20th century. Flying had been the dream of human beings for several centuries before it was finally accomplished. History is full of myths and fables featuring humans with wings doing extraordinary things in the sky. In Greek mythology, Icarus is believed to have flown so close to the sun despite his father's advice, that his waxed feathers melted, leading to his crash landing and subsequent drowning in the sea. When it comes to the practicality of flying, the first experiment where an object flew in the air was in fact carried out by two Chinese philosophers, Mozi and Liu Ban, who are also said to be the inventors behind the kite. As a result of their pioneering ways in the 5th century, they were able to gather military intelligence from rival kingdoms. That said, Ibn Farnas is still considered to be at the forefront of his field given that he was the first aviator to fly with a heavier-than-air machine. Born in the 9th century in Izn Ronda al-Andalus, which is present-day Ronda, Spain. He spent most of his adult life in the Emirate of Córdoba, one of the major learning hubs during the Umayyad Caliphate. Some historical accounts suggest al-Farnas was influenced by Armin Furman, who was neither a scientist nor polymath but an astute observer of nature. It was Furman who first built wings made of wooden planks wrapped in silk and bird feathers. In the early 850s, Furman climbed to the top of the tallest mosque minaret in Qurtuba and jumped off wearing the wings. Although his attempt quickly failed and he plummeted to earth, the flying machine inflated just in time and slowed his descent. He was lucky enough not to break any bones in the fall. The delay of his landing proved somewhat life-saving. Ibn Farnas watched Furman's adventure as he stood among the gathered, fascinated crowds who were all watching the skies above in amazement. Impressed with Furman's result, Ibn Farnas began to realize that the act of flying in the air needed further investigation. He studied flight patterns of different birds and objects for 23 years. He then constructed his flying machine and jumped off Jabal al-Aris in Yemen despite his advanced years. Several centuries later, an Ottoman Turk Ahmed Celebi successfully flew and landed across the Bosphorus in 1630.